Welcome to session 5. In this session, we will talk about learning your path to building wealth. We just finished talking about defining your lifestyle that you desire to live by creating your major expense buckets. And before we get to developing passive assets that are going to provide for those expense buckets, I want to have an intermediary conversation with you regarding this graph. So learning your path to building wealth. And I've been working on this idea for some time when it comes to this bell curve that I'm going to present to you now. This bell curve really is the evolution of an idea when you think about it. An idea begins with original thought or some kind of creative activity, and it is implemented, right? It's the song is sung or recorded, the organization is launched, the strategic plans put in place, etc. At some point, as you begin to implement this idea, you begin to stabilize the organization, or you stabilize the asset, or you stabilize the creative endeavor, or whatever entrepreneurial redemptive thing it might be. It could be a church plant, it could be an organization that does something in the marketplace. But at some point, the idea is implemented and it stabilizes. And then there's a process to this idea that's known as refining. Sometimes there are people who can come into a room and who can look around and know exactly what problems need to be solved very quickly, and they're ready to refine the idea as it's been stabilized. And then the evolution of the idea continues into maintenance mode. And there are people who come along who continue to maintain the processes of whatever this idea has evolved into. So for our purposes here, if we think about a church plant, at some level, the idea to plant a church in Washington, D.C. happened, and we were faithful to go and implement that idea and work to stabilize the idea. And at this time, the idea is a full-blown organization. It's a church. We raised up elders. At the point of stabilization, we passed off this church plant, hired the next person to come in and refine, take the church to the next level, and at some point there will be staff hired or a pastor to take over after the pastor who came in to refine, that will maintain and continue to faithfully lead this church into existence. So even in the idea, when we talk about church planting, you can see the evolution of this idea begin to take shape. And at every stage, at every quadrant here, the create, implement, and then at the top, stabilize, refine, or maintain, you and I have a primary and maybe a secondary place that we lean. And I think this principle is pretty universal for most of us. Those who create are not great maintainers. Those who create don't do well at stabilizing. At some level, there's a baton pass or a team is created around the founder, and they begin to take the baton as he leads or she leads in different ways, even if this person is the creator of this idea, or the entrepreneur that has the idea to launch this business, or the church planter that's taken the gospel to whatever context this church now needs to be planted in. And so when you think about this evolution of an idea, my question for you is where do you find yourself on this bell curve? Because when we begin to think about tent making and creating passive assets that are going to build wealth, that allow us to leave a legacy for our children, at one level, I want you to be honest with yourself about yourself and where you best fit on this bell curve. Is it creating, implementing, stabilizing, refining, or maintaining? For me, I live on the left side of the bell curve. I create. I have an idea. I'm going to create it. We're going to have a process for what that looks like. I'm even going to be the one who implements it. That's probably my secondary strength. When you get to stabilize, whether it's a church plant or organization or a business, I am not your guy. I want really nothing of it. Unless I can automate, eliminate, or delegate, the baton for me needs to be passed to the next guy. So, or person. So in this model, this evolution of an idea, I find the most energy here. I am drained and robbed of energy at stabilize, refine, and maintain. I get the most energy here. I am drained and robbed at stabilize, refine, and maintain. I also bring the most value to an organization or an idea or the creation, again, for the purposes of this book and course, an income producing asset on the left side of the bell curve. So the goal for me is to think about the expense buckets that I'm going to create and that I have for my life, and then all the assets that I'm going to go and create that are going to provide for those expense buckets on autopilot. And I'm never going to think about it so that I can use my time how I want to. And so the most wealthy people in the world know that time is your most valuable resource. It's the most limited, and if you can have discretionary time, then you are wealthy. But you have to have assets, providing for passive assets, providing for your major expense buckets in your life. And if you can figure out how you can operate on this bell curve, you're going to get there faster. And the whole goal is I want to live my entire life on this side of the bell curve. So when I think about tent making and I think about creating passive assets that are going to build wealth for me, everything for me is on this side of the bell curve. I'm thinking about creating, implementing, and either stabilizing through automating it, eliminating, or delegating it. And then I'm going to circle back and do it again. And I'm just going to live on this side of the bell curve. I want to do that in my ministry. I want to do that in how I lead and develop teams. And I want to do that in this conversation as well. How I go about creating income producing passive assets is all going to be on this side of the bell curve. And I think this is important. Understanding where you fall on the bell curve is important for three reasons. Really four reasons here. One, this allows you to be honest with yourself about yourself. I mentioned this a moment ago. I coach people all of the time who are in wrong positions on this bell curve and are miserable because they don't understand this concept. I have coached creatives who just need to live in quadrant one down here, but are leading teams and refining something that gets to them finally, and then they're bringing it to final approval, and they're miserable because they're trying to lead teams when really they just need to be creating ideas and living in this quadrant. I coach people oftentimes who are put in positions to establish something, but their gift set is in maintaining, getting into the details and the weeds of a process, and constantly, continually being able to take a process and maintain it over time for the health of the idea, or in this case, the health of an organization. But you have to be honest with yourself about yourself. Know who you are. Know where you bring energy. Know where you get energy. Know where you bring value. And then you can begin to start moving towards creating income-producing assets. Number two, this allows you to know where to give your time. Again, which I mentioned a moment ago, is the most important resource that you have. The most valuable resource you have by far, more than any asset you will gain in your life, is your time. Wealthy people know that discretionary time is the greatest resource you can have. Understanding where you lie on the bell curve will allow you to define not only your yes, but it will potentially allow you to define the rest of your life and the guardrails of what assignments that you begin to give yourself to when it's time to pass the baton to the next leader, how self-aware you are in the things that you start and create, whether it's ministry, business, or even a passive asset that's going to build wealth. Number three, this allows you to know then where to begin wealth. So again, for me, I'm gonna come up with a million ideas, and then I'm gonna go find funding. I'm gonna go find partners who live on this side, right? Who are maintainers of the process. If I can come with excitement and energy, and I can come with the idea, and I can come with a strategy to implement it, I'm ready to go find a refiner and a maintainer who's going to make my idea better, but who's going to maintain the process in the weeds or the bookkeeping or all the things that I don't want to do and I don't find joy in or energy in. Or it basically robs my energy for whatever idea or process it is. I don't ever want to live here. I want to partner with people who do. I want to partner with people who are gifted on the right side as I create and implement and then begin to pass the baton either to a leader or a team to stabilize, or again, if I can automate, delegate, or eliminate here, I'm going to do that as I have a partner on this side of the bell curve. So when you know where to put yourself on this bell curve, you can begin to build wealth here too. I'm the guy coming up with the idea. If I'm going to work towards finding an investment property, this is probably going to be where I live. If you live here and you're thinking, I don't even know how to do this, where to get started. I don't have the energy to do it, but I can maintain the process. You got to go and find someone like me who can create and implement to stabilize. I probably never want to personally build a giant business unless I just develop teams around me who can take the evolution of the idea into an organization, into a giant business. Because again, I live on the left side of the bell curve. If you live on the right side, you're going to love walking into organizations that have already existed. If you live over here in Refine, you can walk into a room and you can know exactly what problems need to be solved, what processes need to be tweaked. You can continue to take the founder's intent, but you can make it even better because you're gifted on the right side of the curve. If you're someone who stabilizes, you can, as someone like me who's going to create and implement, I can pass the baton to you, and you can take it and create processes. You can create the structure. You can take it to the next level. In some ways, these are the people who kick up the dust, and as the dust settles, you kind of have to have people here that put it into an organizational pattern or process or procedure, and then someone can come in and refine, make better, and then maintain and can continue to own and control the processes that make the idea work and make the idea great in the first place. So I'm a starter, I create, I implement, then I pass off to someone to stabilize. But I want to build wealth every time I start a business. So every time I create an asset, if I'm passing it off to someone to oversee, it's still be passive in my life, though I might lose a percentage of whatever income is coming in because I'm paying this person now to stabilize the process. And then fourthly, this allows you to work, I think, with purpose and joy. With purpose and joy. So if you're a pastor, you know what kind of assignments you need to take. If you're someone on this side of the bell curve, on the right side, you can go into older, more established churches, and you can refine, you can maintain. If you're someone on this side, you need new work, you need church planting work, you need really kind of apostolic work that we might find in the book of Acts, where you're advancing the gospel outside of the walls of the church. If you are a nonprofit leader, you can find yourself on this bell curve as well. Business leader, same thing. Everyone has a primary, I think, and secondary close by it. But this allows you to work with purpose and joy. It allows you to define your yes, and then it allows you to then begin to know, okay, I've got my expense buckets created, but how can I then now go and create assets and passive assets? Well, now I know where I need to live, and now I know who I can partner with in developing these passive assets. It's going to take some self-work to determine where you lie on the bell curve, the evolution of an idea, where you find energy, where you bring energy, what brings you joy, where you bring value, and what part of the idea, organization, business, creation of the asset, etc. And now that you have major expense buckets to create, and you've already created those, you also know where you lie on this bell curve. Then you can get to the next step, the hard work of developing income producing passive assets that will not only eliminate those major expense buckets, but they will build wealth that will allow you to leave an inheritance to your children's children.